Hi there, welcome to Long Distance Review, and on this week's episode I'm going to look at the new album from Creeper entitled Sex, Death and the Infinite Void. Creeper are a goth punk band and they're from the UK. They were formed back in 2014 and they originally released an EP, a self-titled EP in 2014. Off the back of this they were signed by Roadrunner Records and released two more EPs in 2015 and 2016 entitled The Callous Heart and The Stranger. They gained quite a cult following all this, and then they continued and released their debut album entitled Eternity in Your Arms in 2017. On the run up to this album, they're a band who utilise social media very, very well, and they know how to build an album and build an announcement. Let's say they use social media well. They even had like a phone number that fans rang, and it would come to a voicemail, and they'd have a whole narrative and a mystery around it, and it would all be like a treasure hunt around their hometown of Southampton, and it all culminated in the announcement of the Eternity in Your Arms album. They have a whole look about them. Every time they do something, they go all in on it in terms of the artwork, the narrative, the aesthetics. And the whole look around this album was the sort of black leather jackets, punk, long hair for Will, this purple logo, the purple logo on the name. And they built all this up very, very well, and they released the critically acclaimed album in 2017, which broke into the top 20 in the UK. They then continued the touring cycle, and they played their last gig in November of 2018 on this touring cycle. And on this last gig they dramatically laid down their leather jackets and announced that they would play no more, and that was the end of it all. The naive Creeper fans sort of thought that was the end of the band, but those of us who know Will Gold as the individual he is, we know that he's a huge David Bowie fan, and he was basically pulling a Ziggy Stardust on us and just announcing the end of that cycle of the band. There was radio silence then for a year, and they came back in September 2019 with some social media posts building up another announcement. They returned then to the live stage on the anniversary of their last gig, and they had this whole new look about them. The whole white suits, Will Gold with this all sort of David Bowie-like face paint, and the logo had changed and everything was black and white. And they came back and announced that the new album would be called Sex, Death and the Infinite Void, and it would be released in May of 2020. Now, the date was then pushed back because of coronavirus, like everything, and it has been released today, July the 31st. Creeper are a very cult phenomenon band, let's say. They've built a very devoted cult following, especially here in the UK. And because of this, they can sort of reinvent themselves, rebrand themselves. They are constantly evolving, and they have a devoted fan base that will always follow them in what they do. And because of all this, I find them constantly interesting as well. What I will say about this album is gone is the whole punk aesthetics that were on Eternity in Your Arms. The punk sound, let's say. The sound on this album is a much more bombastic and theatrical and epic sounding album. There's still a lot of punk involved, but it's an almost cinematic album in its nature. The album it has a narrative, let's say. It has a real journey to the album. The narrative is of these two characters, of Ro and Annabelle, who have this ill-fated romance, and it really works. The narrative works well. You feel like you're on a journey. You feel like you're on a road trip, like an Oliver Stone sort of Natural Born Killers road trip, but with vampires. And for those people who want Eternity in Your Arms too, you won't get it on here, but what you will get is dragged into this new gothic dark pop genre that Creeper jump into and out of throughout this album. Although this album still has these huge choruses and huge melodies that were forged on Eternity in Your Arms, this whole album has a much more fresh sound around it. The opening three tracks of Be My End, Born Cold and Cyanide is a real lesson in tuning the listener's ear into a new sound of a band. It still has a lot of punk leanings on those songs, but there's this 1950s Americana, gothic Americana style leaning on those songs that works really well. Be My End has this driving rhythm which sounds like you're driving on this open top car down the Vegas Strip in the 1950s, and has this almost surf rock style guitar on there, and Will's huge vocal hook is undeniable.
Unforgiven, I'll be choking, drinking, dying, dreaming of you. When the sun comes, we vanish like vampires. We're gonna die in the summer, baby. You could be
The album is layered a lot better than Eternity in Your Arms, and it feels richer than the grimier Eternity in Your Arms album. The band utilised Hannah's vocals and keyboards much more. They have these real dramatic synths at times on the album, and they've layered Will's vocals to great effect throughout the album. This album is a real throwback, let's say, to albums like The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, Good Morning by the Alkaline Trio. Will certainly takes vocal tics from Matt Skiba, and the way he uses these caveats in his vocals really reminds me of Matt Skiba. But the theatrics and dramatics around the album really feel like The Black Parade at times, and I think both of those bands would really be delighted with the results of this album, let's say. Halfway through the album is really when the gear shift kicks in and you realise the creeper of old is no more, but you're better off for it. There's songs like Paradise, which is this sweeping track with an almost spaghetti western feel to it, and Will's vocals almost dip into baritone level, Glenn Danzig zone, let's say. There's a song called Poison Heart, which thrives on Will's vocal range, sort of going from like this goth pop croon right up to these soaring wails on the chorus. You have a song like Thorns of Love, which could be written by Jim Steinman from Meatloaf. It has this display of this dramatic theatrics throughout that song, and that's what Meatloaf was always going for on all his songs. In fact, the whole album feels like a stage show, like a production. You feel like it could be a musical production like Rocky Horror Picture Show or Little Shop of Horrors. I can't wait for the stage show of this. I feel like it will come alive on stage, this. Much like with the song Crickets on Eternity in Your Arms, Hannah comes along and kind of steals the show on the standout track 4 years ago. Her fragile vocals work really, really well over these soaring and sweeping violins and these acoustic guitars. Will comes in on that song with his best Nick Cave impression, and it really reminds me of the Nick Cave Murder Ballads album, where he did a duet with Kylie Minogue on a song called Where the Wild Roses Grow. Really reminds me of that, and it works really, really well.
Too fast? Did you grow up slow? Along the way I lost myself in your shadow. I left you for a little while 4 years ago. Sometimes I feel lost and right.
They dip their toes back into punk later on the album with a song called Napalm Girls, which it shows a much more abrasive punk side to the band, just shows Creeper's range of what they can do, and has a chorus to die for in that song as well. They end the album with the heartbreaking piano ballad of All My Friends, which is this perfect full stop at the end of the album and displays the honesty and vulnerability that the Creeper fans really clamour for from the band. This album is stunning. It draws inspiration from so many different areas: David Bowie, from garage rock, from 1950s doo-wop, from Roy Orbison, from punk, and they put it all together in this incredible cohesive journey, it feels like. The band are an incredibly ambitious and courageous band, and to put everything on the table, they lay everything on the line for each thing they do. And don't you want your band to do that? Yeah, bands can go throughout their whole careers just doing the same album over and over again. Iron Maiden have made a successful career doing it. Anthrax, Megadeth, Killswitch Engage, they do it all to varying degrees. But Creeper are just a band who don't hold back in what they want to do. They are creative, and their music is an art form because of that, and that's better. This is a stunning album, and it will be high up on the end of the year list. I think it's better than their debut album. Others will disagree, and punk fans will say they turned their back on punk, but isn't it more punk to just put a line through what you were doing and do what the hell you want? Let me know what you think of the album, and I'll be back soon with another review. Thanks very much.